A misread weather report changed the outcome of WW2. Chain reaction 50-minute the ripple effect. It is 15 minutes past 4 in the morning. June the 5th, 1944. In a mansion on the English coast, 13 men are about to decide whether D-Day, the Allied invasion of Nazi-occupied France, happens at all. And the decision does not depend on generals. It does not depend on tanks, or ships, or spies. It depends on a weather forecast. Outside the windows, a gale is shaking the trees. Rain is hammering the glass sideways. And a tall, exhausted Scotsman named James Stagg is telling the most powerful men in the Western world that tomorrow morning, for just a few hours, the storm will pause. He cannot prove it. Half of his own forecasters think he is wrong. Across the English Channel, the German army is looking at the same sky. Their meteorologists have studied the same storm. And they have reached the opposite conclusion: no invasion is possible in weather like this. So on this exact morning, their commander is leaving for Germany to celebrate his wife's birthday. One sky. Two forecasts. One of them is wrong. And the entire Second World War is about to pivot on which one. James Martin Stagg was not supposed to be here. He was born in 1900, the son of a plumber from a small town outside Edinburgh. He became a schoolteacher, then a geophysicist, a quiet, careful man who spent 1932 leading a scientific expedition into the Canadian Arctic, measuring the magnetism of the Earth while frostbite chewed at his fingers. He was not a celebrity scientist. He was not even, by training, a weather forecaster. He was an administrator of science, patient, methodical, immune to drama. Which is exactly why, in 1943, the Allied High Command chose him for a job that would have destroyed a more excitable man. His title, Chief Meteorological Officer for Operation Overlord, the invasion of Europe. His actual job, to take 3 teams of brilliant, quarreling weather scientists, British, American, and Royal Navy, and force their arguments into a single sentence that a general could bet a war on. Here is what nobody tells you about weather forecasting in 1944. There were no satellites. There were no computers. There was no radar picture of the Atlantic. A forecast was built from scattered reports, a ship here, a weather station in Iceland there, an aircraft flying grid patterns over the ocean, plotted by hand, in pencil, on paper charts, every 6 hours. Beyond 2 days, prediction dissolved into guesswork. And the men in charge of the invasion were asking Stagg to see 5 days ahead. One of Stagg's colleagues put it bluntly: asking for a 5-day forecast over the English Channel was asking for a miracle on demand. Stagg knew the limits of his science better than anyone in the room. That was his curse. Because the men above him did not want limits. They wanted certainty. And in the first days of June 1944, certainty was the one thing the sky refused to give. Within 72 hours, this careful, unglamorous man would have to stand in front of Dwight Eisenhower and stake the largest military operation in human history on his own judgment. If he was wrong in one direction, tens of thousands of soldiers would drown in a storm. If he was wrong in the other, the invasion would be cancelled, and the secret of where and when the Allies would strike would be lost forever. To understand the weight on his shoulders, you first have to understand the machine he was holding in his hands. By June 1944, southern England had become the largest military base the world had ever seen. 2 years of planning. Millions of tons of equipment. And a number that is still hard to believe. On the first day alone, the plan called for 156,000 men to cross the Channel and storm the coast of Normandy. Carrying them, the largest armada ever assembled. 6,939 vessels, battleships, destroyers, transports, and thousands of flat-bottomed landing craft that could ram themselves onto a beach. Above them, more than 11,000 aircraft. The target, 5 beaches along 50 miles of French coastline. Code names: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, Sword. But here is the part of the plan that history classes skip. This entire machine, every ship, every man, every gun, was the hostage of the moon and the tide. Follow the chain, because everything that happens next depends on it. The paratroopers needed a full moon, or close to it, to see the ground they were jumping into. The landing craft needed a low tide at dawn, so the crews could see the obstacles and mines the Germans had planted in the surf, half-submerged steel gates, wooden stakes tipped with explosives. The Navy needed daylight for its guns. The Air Force needed clear skies for its bombers. The whole operation needed calm seas, because a flat-bottomed landing craft in a heavy swell is not a boat. It is a bathtub full of seasick men, waiting to capsize. Put all those demands together, and the calendar of June 1944 collapses to almost nothing. June the 5th. June the 6th. June the 7th. Then the moon and the tide fall out of alignment, and the next usable window is 2 weeks away, around June the 19th. Remember that date. June the 19th. It will come back at the end of this story like a ghost. And waiting was not simply inconvenient. It was dangerous in ways that kept planners awake at night. By the 1st of June, the assault troops were already sealed onto their ships, briefed, locked down, forbidden any contact with the shore, because every one of them now knew the secret. You cannot hold 156,000 men in steel boxes for 2 extra weeks and expect the greatest secret of the war to survive. Every day of delay was another day for German reconnaissance to spot the fleet. Another day for a single loose word in a single pub to reach Berlin. And there was a second secret, stranger, and even more fragile. For months, the Allies had been performing a magic trick called Operation Fortitude. Across the fields of southeast England stood an entire phantom army, inflatable tanks, plywood aircraft, landing craft made of canvas and oil drums. Radio operators broadcast the daily chatter of divisions that did not exist. Berlin spies in Britain, every single one of them captured and turned, reported it all faithfully home. The story this theater told was simple: the real invasion would come at Calais, the narrowest point of the Channel, 200 miles from Normandy. And the German High Command believed it. Entire German armies stood waiting at the wrong beach. But an illusion like this has a half-life. Every day it survived was borrowed time. One reconnaissance flight in the wrong place, one turned agent exposed, one delay too many, and the phantom army would dissolve, taking the invasion's greatest advantage with it. The machine could not wait. The lie could not wait. The Supreme Commander, Dwight Eisenhower, had set the date, June the 5th. The machine was loaded. The countdown was running. And then, in the first days of June, the barometers began to fall. Out in the North Atlantic, something enormous was forming, a chain of storm systems, marching east, one after another, like waves of an incoming army no one could shoot at. The finest invasion machine in history was about to collide with the oldest enemy of every sailor, the weather. And the only men who could see it coming were 6 forecasters, who could not agree on what they were seeing. Stagg's forecast did not come from one team. It came from 3, and they despised each other's methods. At the American Air Force headquarters, codenamed Wide Wing, the lead voice belonged to Irving Crick, a Caltech showman who believed weather ran in patterns you could look up in the past, like a library of old skies. Find a day in history when the maps looked similar, Crick argued, and you can read tomorrow off the old charts. His forecasts were confident, smooth, optimistic. Generals loved him. At the British Meteorological Office at Dunstable sat his opposite, Sverre Pedersen, a Norwegian who had escaped the Nazi occupation of his homeland and helped write the mathematics of modern weather analysis. Pedersen believed the atmosphere obeyed physics, not history books. You built the forecast from the storm fronts upward, and if the physics said danger, no old chart could talk you out of it. And between them, the Royal Navy's forecasters, men whose entire tradition was the feel of the sea, and who cared about one question only: what will the waves do to a flat-bottomed boat? 3 teams. 3 philosophies. 1 telephone conference, twice a day, every day, with Stagg in the middle, forbidden to forecast himself, required to deliver one unified answer upward. Through May, the weather over the Channel had been glorious. Warm. Still. Perfect invasion weather, week after week, while the troops trained and the ships loaded. Then June arrived, and the Atlantic turned. On June the 2nd, Pedersen's charts showed a procession of deep depressions swinging toward Europe. Crick's charts, built from his historical lookalikes, showed the storms sliding harmlessly north. Same ocean. Same data. Opposite futures. On the evening of June the 3rd, with the invasion set for the morning of June the 5th, the teams finally converged, on the bad news. The 5th would be foul, low cloud that would blind the bombers, high wind that would swamp the landing craft. At 4:15 in the morning on June the 4th, Stagg delivered that verdict to Eisenhower. And Eisenhower did the hardest thing a commander can do with a loaded weapon. He put it down. The order went out. Stop everything. But part of the machine was already moving. One convoy, over 100 vessels bound for Utah Beach, had sailed early and missed the recall signal. It was steaming, alone, straight toward an empty invasion and a waiting enemy coast. A destroyer chased it down through the rising sea, and turned it around within sight of catastrophe. A seaplane had to drop a message canister onto a deck to make the recall stick. The secret survived, barely. Now came the truly cruel part. The postponement bought 24 hours. But the storm was not a 24-hour storm. If June the 6th failed too, the whole machine had to unwind, ships back to port, men unloaded, fuel burned, secrecy bleeding away, and the next tide window waiting 2 weeks out, on June the 19th. That evening, Sunday, June the 4th, while the gale rattled the windows of Southwick House, Stagg stared at the newest charts from the Atlantic. And in the chaos of pressure lines, he saw something. A gap between 2 storms. A ridge of calmer air, sliding east behind the cold front, small, fast, and fragile. 36 hours of workable weather. Maybe. Was it real? Crick said yes, enthusiastically, as always. Pedersen was cautious, the Navy men were nervous about the swell. The window, if it existed at all, would open on the morning of June the 6th and start closing almost immediately. Stagg had hours to decide what to tell Eisenhower. Not days. Hours. And while he waited, one question sat unspoken in the room, the question this whole story turns on. What did the Germans see? Here is what the German army knew in the first week of June 1944, the Allies were coming. Sometime. Somewhere. Hitler had bet the war on a wall, thousands of bunkers, guns, and obstacles from Norway to Spain, and on a field marshal, Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, now commander of the coastal defenses of northern France. Rommel's conviction was simple and absolutely correct: the invasion had to be smashed on the beaches, in the first 24 hours. He called it the longest day. If the Allies got ashore and stayed, Germany's war in the West was lost. Everything, then, depended on being ready at the right moment. And knowing the right moment depended, just as it did for Eisenhower, on the weather. Which brings us to the fact that decided the Second World War, and that almost nobody has heard of. Germany was forecasting blind. Weather in Europe is born in the West. It marches in from the Atlantic, from Greenland and Iceland and the open ocean. Whoever owns the Atlantic owns tomorrow's forecast. In 1940, Germany had eyes out there, weather ships drifting in the ocean, manned stations on Greenland's coast, long-range aircraft flying weather patrols. By June 1944, the Allies had systematically put those eyes out. This was a war inside the war, for years long, fought in fog and pack ice, and almost completely unknown. In May 1941, British destroyers ran down the German weather ship München east of Iceland. The boarding party wanted more than the ship, they carried orders to grab her code documents for the top-secret codebreakers at Bletchley Park. 1 month later, the same trap closed on the weather ship Lauenburg. The German Navy never grasped what it had lost. Its weather fleet had become a supply line for the enemy's codebreakers, and then it simply ceased to exist. Then came the Arctic. German teams kept landing on Greenland and Svalbard to set up secret weather stations, Allied patrols kept hunting them across the ice, burning the huts, taking the meteorologists prisoner. The Germans grew so desperate that in late 1943 a U-boat planted a fully automatic weather station, codenamed Kurt, on the coast of Canada itself. A robot spy, radioing wind and pressure from Labrador. It worked for only a few days before its signals drowned in interference. Nobody found it until 1981. As a last resort, U-boats in the Atlantic were ordered to surface and radio weather reports. But every transmission was a flare in the dark, Allied direction finders triangulated the signal, and the hunters came. For a U-boat crew, a weather report was a suicide note. Piece by piece, transmission by transmission, Germany's window on the Atlantic closed. The weather planes were being shot out of the sky by Allied fighters. By the summer of 1944, the Reich's forecasters were reading the ocean through a keyhole. The Allies, meanwhile, had the entire western half of the map, stations in Canada, Greenland, Iceland, ships across the Atlantic, aircraft flying weather runs day and night. One side could watch a storm being born 3,000 miles away. The other side found out about it when the rain arrived. So when the great June storms rolled in, the German forecasters saw only the leading edge, an endless wall of foul weather. What they could not see was the gap behind it. The 36-hour window did not exist on any German chart. Their conclusion was logical, confident, and fatal: no invasion is possible before mid-June. The seas are too high. The clouds are too low. No commander would dare. And the German war machine relaxed. Naval patrols in the Channel for the night of June the 5th, cancelled, because of weather. Luftwaffe reconnaissance flights over the English ports, where 6,000 ships lay at anchor, grounded, because of weather. Senior officers of the 7th Army in Normandy, sent away from their posts, to a map exercise in Rennes, scheduled for the morning of June the 6th. The exercise scenario, with the black humor history sometimes writes for itself, repelling an Allied landing. And Field Marshal Rommel himself? On the morning of June the 4th, he got into his car and drove home to Germany. His wife Lucy's birthday was June the 6th, and he had bought her shoes in Paris. He also planned to see Hitler, to ask for more panzer divisions. His diary entry for the decision rested on one thing: the weather reports. The sea was impossible. Nothing could happen for days. 2 armies. 1 sky. The Allies saw a door about to crack open. The Germans saw a wall. The most heavily defended coastline on Earth was about to spend the most important night of the war with its eyes closed, because of a forecast built on an ocean it could no longer see. All that remained was for one man in England to say the word. Sunday evening, June the 4th, 9:30 p.m. The library of Southwick House. Blackout curtains drawn. Outside, wind and rain, exactly as forecast, which is the one grim piece of good news, because it means the meteorologists were right to cancel the 5th. The system works. Around the room, Eisenhower. Montgomery, commander of the ground forces. Admiral Ramsay, master of the invasion fleet. Air Marshals Tedder and Lee Mallory. The heaviest collection of military authority ever gathered in one country house. Stagg is shown in. And he says, in the flat voice of a man reporting instrument readings, that there has been a development. A cold front is sweeping through faster than expected. Behind it, a window. Beginning tomorrow afternoon, June the 5th, and lasting into June the 6th, clearing skies, dropping winds. Not good weather. Barely acceptable weather. And after it, more storms. 36 hours. Perhaps less. The room erupts in questions. How confident is he? What about the cloud base for the bombers? What about the swell on the beaches? Lee Mallory worries the air forces will be flying half-blind. Ramsay needs a decision within the hour. His slowest convoys must sail immediately or the 6th is impossible too. Somebody asks Stagg what the weather is like right now, out over the Atlantic, along the invasion route. If the ships had sailed on the original schedule, they would be in the middle of it, scattered, seasick, wrecked as a fighting force. Eisenhower pulls the room. Montgomery, go. Ramsay, the Navy can do it. The airmen, uneasy. Eisenhower gives the provisional order, the fleet sails. But the weather can still cancel it. Final confirmation will come before dawn. Stagg does not sleep. The charts from the Atlantic come in through the night, and he reads them like a man reading his own trial verdict, line by line. Because here is what June the 5th, 1944, really was, the loneliest night in the history of weather forecasting. His American colleagues had promised windows before that never opened. His Norwegian colleagues still feared the ridge would collapse. Whatever the teams believed, only one man's summary would reach the supreme commander. If the window failed, the invasion drowned, and the name attached to the forecast, for the rest of history, was Stagg. 4:15 a.m. June the 5th. The final conference. The gale outside is at its height. The building is shaking. It is, on its face, insane to launch an invasion into this. Stagg stands and repeats the forecast. The window holds. The front is clearing Portsmouth within hours. By dawn on the 6th, broken cloud, wind force 3 to 4 on the beaches. Then it closes again. Silence. Eisenhower sits with it. The men around him have given their pieces, the decision belongs to one person, and every version of it might be the catastrophic one. Launch, and the weather may slaughter the landing force. Wait, and the secret, the tide, the whole coiled spring of the invasion may never align again. He looks up. Okay, let's go. That is the entire order. For words, spoken into a rattling storm, on the strength of a weather map. Within minutes, the signal is moving through 5,000 ships. The machine is committed. There is no recall now. And in his pocket notebook, Eisenhower writes a different 4 sentences, a message to be released only if it all goes wrong. It ends, if any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine alone. He puts the note away and waits for the weather to decide who he is. Just before midnight, June the 5th, the sky over southern England fills with engines. 23,400 airborne soldiers, American and British, are flying into the dark behind the beaches, navigating by moonlight through the ragged edge of Stagg's clearing sky. The cloud is worse than hoped. Drops scatter across the countryside. Men land miles from their zones, in flooded fields, in orchards, on village rooftops, and still, by sheer dispersal, they convince the German command that paratroopers are everywhere and nowhere. At German headquarters in Normandy, the telephone calls begin. And run straight into the wall the weather built. The commander of Army Group B is in Germany, wrapping his wife's birthday present. Hitler is asleep at Berchtesgaden, and no one dares wake him to release the reserve panzer divisions. Senior staff are away at the war game. The Navy has no patrols in the Channel. The Luftwaffe has flown no reconnaissance. For 6 critical hours, the most disciplined army in Europe is a body without a head, because every layer of its command believed the same forecast: nothing can happen in this weather. Then the dawn comes up on June the 6th. And a German artillery observer in a bunker above Omaha Beach looks out at the gray, wind-torn horizon. And the horizon is made of ships. 6,900 vessels, arriving out of weather that was supposed to make their arrival impossible. At 5:50 a.m. the battleships open fire. 11,590 Allied aircraft fly on D-Day. The Luftwaffe, grounded, blinded, and gutted, manages a few hundred sorties against them. Along 50 miles of coast, the ramps of the landing craft slam down into the surf. Stagg's window is real. The wind is hard, the sea is rougher than anyone wanted, tanks founder in the swell, boats swamp, men wade in under fire through chest-deep water. It is ugly. But it is possible. That is all the forecast ever promised: possible. By nightfall, the numbers tell the story of 5 very different beaches. At Utah, the landings ran a mile off course, onto a luckier stretch of sand than the one assigned. At Gold, Juno and Sword, the British and Canadians ground through the defenses and pushed miles inland. And at Omaha, everything the weather had spared went wrong anyway. The bombers had overshot the defenses through the cloud, the amphibious tanks sank in the swell, and the first waves walked into interlocking machine gun fire from bluffs the plan said would be flattened. Between the American beaches rose a 100-foot cliff called Point du Hoc, crowned, the map said, with heavy guns that could rake both landing zones. 225 U.S. Rangers were sent to climb it. In Stagg's leftover swell, their boats shipped water all the way in, men bailed with helmets to stay afloat. They fired rocket-propelled grappling hooks up the cliff face, and climbed hand over hand, on wet ropes, into grenade bursts rolling down from above. They took the top in minutes. The heavy guns were not there, moved inland, found in an orchard hours later, and destroyed where they hid. 2 days later, when relief finally reached them, 90 Rangers were still standing. The price of the day, beach by beach. Modern research puts the confirmed Allied dead for the single day of June the 6th at 4,414 men. 4,414. Each one a letter that would be written to a family that summer. And yet, against the Atlantic Wall, against 4 years of German preparation, it was a fraction of what the planners had braced for. Churchill had privately feared tens of thousands dead in the first hours. The window had done its work, the defenders were surprised, headless, and slow. By midnight on June the 6th, 156,000 Allied soldiers stood on French soil. The beachhead held. In England, James Stagg allowed himself to breathe. His window had opened on schedule and stayed open just long enough. But the weather was not finished with this story. 2 weeks later, the Atlantic would send its final argument, aimed directly at the date the invasion would have used if Eisenhower had said, "Wait." To keep the invasion alive, the Allies had brought their own harbors with them, 2 gigantic artificial ports, codenamed Mulberry, towed across the channel in pieces and assembled off the beaches. Through them poured the fuel, the ammunition, the food, thousands of tons a day, feeding the armies fighting inland. Then, on June the 19th, the sky collapsed. A storm burst into the channel, the worst June storm on that coast in 4 decades. For 3 days it tore at the anchorage with winds the forecasters had no window to offer and no way to stop. It smashed the American Mulberry at Omaha Beach beyond repair. It hurled some 800 vessels onto the sand like toys. In 3 days, the weather destroyed more Allied shipping than the German Navy, the Luftwaffe, and every coastal gun combined had managed since June the 6th. Now hold that storm in your mind, and remember the calendar. If Eisenhower had said, "Wait," in the small hours of June the 5th, if Stagg had flinched, if the window had been dismissed as wishful thinking, the invasion would have rolled forward to the next alignment of moon and tide. June the 19th. The greatest amphibious operation in history would have sailed directly into the century's worst June gale, not as a fleet arriving, but as a fleet dying. Landing craft swamped by the thousand in open water. Paratroopers scattered like leaves. No air cover, no naval gunfire worth the name, and the entire secret spent. There would have been no second chance. The men, the ships, the deception that had pinned German armies to the wrong coastline, all of it was a one-time key that history only lets you turn once. Eisenhower knew exactly what he had escaped. When the June storm broke, he sent Stagg a short handwritten note. It survives. It reads, "I thank the gods of war we went when we did." From that one decision, the chain runs forward with terrible simplicity. Because the invasion landed on June the 6th, the beachhead was secure before the great storm hit, and survived it. Because the beachhead survived, 1 million Allied soldiers were in France by late July. Paris was free by August. Germany was now bleeding on 2 fronts, its cities burning, its western wall gone. 11 months after Stagg's window opened, the war in Europe was over. Run the chain backward, and every link hangs from the same nail. The surrender hangs on the 2 fronts. The second front hangs on the beachhead. The beachhead hangs on the surprise. The surprise hangs on the storm, and on 6 tired men in a map room who read the same sky as their enemies, and read it better. The Germans were not fools. Their meteorologists were among the finest in the world. They reached the correct conclusion from the data they had. That is the terrifying part. Their data had a hole in it the size of the Atlantic, a hole the Allies had spent 4 years quietly cutting, 1 captured weather ship, 1 raided Arctic station at a time. Nobody in Berlin ever saw the forecast fail, because the failure was invisible, it looked exactly like confidence. There is one more ripple, and you are living inside it. The agony of those June conferences, 6 experts, 1 sky, no way to know who was right, convinced the men who lived through it that forecasting by argument had to die. Among the people pulled into that post-war crusade were veterans of the D-Day weather teams, and the result, within a decade, was the first computer weather forecast, the atmosphere as mathematics, not memory. Every forecast on your phone tonight, the 5-day outlook you glance at without thinking, is a direct descendant of the morning when a 5-day forecast was worth 156,000 lives, and nobody could honestly make one. And James Stagg? He went back to scientific administration, wrote his memoir of those 5 days, and remains what he was that night at Southwick House, the least famous man on whom the 20th century ever balanced. He never claimed genius. He claimed only that he told the generals what the sky would probably do, including how unsure he was, and that they trusted him with the truth of it. One army treated a weather forecast as a weapon, and sharpened it for 4 years. The other treated it as a formality, and stopped checking what it was built on. The invasion that freed a continent did not begin with a gun. It began with a man saying, "The storm will pause tomorrow, trust me for 36 hours." History rarely announces where it keeps its hinges. Sometimes an empire's fate is written in pencil, on a weather chart, at 4:15 in the morning.